It was a Wednesday evening when I noticed something strange. Not the kind of strange that screams at you with red flags and neon lights, but that subtle, irritating kind that nags at the back of your brain like a fly you can't swat away. She came home without her wedding ring. No explanation. No apology. No nervous fidgeting to hide it. Just strolled into the house, kicked off her shoes, dropped her gym bag by the hallway table like everything was completely normal. My name's Marcus, by the way, not that it matters much in the grand scheme of things. But if you're gonna stick around for this story, you might as well know what name to cuss at when you start thinking I should have figured it all out sooner. We've been married 6 years. I'm a locksmith. Yeah, go ahead and laugh, because the irony will hit you like a brick later. And she, Samantha, worked at a high-end hair salon. The kind of place that charges $200 just to wash your scalp and give you a trim. She'd been there for years, same crew, same boss, same fake smiles for wealthy clients who came in just to get validated and pampered. I never had a reason not to trust her. She was independent, sharp as hell, and always knew how to shut someone down with a single look. That day, though, she didn't have that spark. She looked tired, not just physically, but like something inside her had been unplugged. Her smile didn't show up when she saw me, and her eyes didn't scan the room like they usually did when she walked in. That's what she always did, checked her surroundings like she was trying to see if anything had changed while she was gone. That day, nothing. Just walked in, tossed her bag, and said, "Hey babe, can we do takeout tonight?" I'm wiped. I noticed her bare finger instantly. It's not like I'm obsessive or anything, but when you've seen a ring on someone's hand every single day for over 2,000 days, its absence hits you like missing a step on the stairs. You don't see it, you feel it. I didn't say anything at first. I played it cool, nodded, and said, "Sure. Chinese or pizza?" She went with Thai. I ordered it while she was in the shower. And while she was in there, I sat on the edge of the couch staring at the door, wondering when the hell everything changed. When she came out, towel around her head, her skin smelling like that rose-scented shampoo I never liked but she swore by, I couldn't help myself. Forgot something today? She turned, paused mid-step, then looked down at herself like I was talking about her forgetting pants. What? I nodded toward her hand. Ring's missing. Oh, she said, like I'd asked if we were out of milk. I left it in the locker at work. I take it off when I do color jobs. Forgot to put it back on. Now, maybe I'd believe that if it was the first time. But 2 days earlier, I had picked up her jacket from the couch and felt something hard in the pocket. It was her ring. I didn't say anything then because we all have off days. Maybe she took it off to put on lotion. Maybe her fingers were swollen. Maybe she didn't want to get hair dye under the band. All logical things. But now, twice in 1 week? I didn't like coincidences. Still, I let it go. What was I gonna say? Hey, did you leave your ring on purpose because you're sneaking around? I didn't want to be that guy. The paranoid, jealous husband who makes mountains out of anthills. We ate dinner on the couch, watched some mindless baking competition, and she laughed like nothing was off. But it was. And I knew it. The next couple of days were worse. She started taking her showers right after coming home, which wasn't her thing. Samantha always liked to unwind first, scroll through her phone, talk shit about her coworkers, ask me about my day. But now? She'd come in, say 2 words, and hit the shower like she had to scrub something off. That's not metaphor. I literally watched her the day I peeked into the bathroom. She was scrubbing her neck like she was trying to remove a tattoo. Then came the car situation. She'd always parked in the driveway. Never once in our marriage did she use the garage. That was my space. I kept my tools there, my gear, my old bike I always swore I'd fix up. Suddenly she's pulling into the garage every evening like it's normal. First day I thought she just wanted shade. Second day, I chalked it up to rain in the forecast. By the third time, I knew she didn't want anyone seeing who dropped her off. Let me say this now, I'm not dumb. I may not have gone to college. I may not wear suits or sit behind a fancy desk. But I work with locks and keys. I know how people hide things. I know how to look for signs that something doesn't line up. It's a sixth sense when your job revolves around securing what other people want to protect. So I started watching. Not obsessively, not in some full-on detective mode. Just paying attention. Subtle stuff. Time she left. Time she came back. Changes in her routine. Smells. Lipstick colors. The sound of her voice when she answered calls in the kitchen and walked to the back porch for better signal. Even though the reception's just fine in our damn house. But the real kicker came the following Monday. It was my day off. She thought I was working late on a lock job out in Gastonia, which was her mistake. I had the whole day to myself and an urge to figure out if I was being paranoid or if my marriage was going off the rails. So I drove by her salon. I didn't go in. I parked across the street, behind a busted-up fence in a lot that hadn't seen a full car in years. And I waited. Watched. For hours. She wasn't there. Her car wasn't in the lot. I called the salon pretending to be a new client. The receptionist said Samantha wasn't working Mondays anymore, hadn't for weeks. Said she switched her schedule around for personal time. I hung up, sat there in my truck with my jaw clenched so tight I thought I might crack a tooth. This wasn't a maybe anymore. This wasn't a hunch. This was betrayal in progress. And not the kind you can shrug off as emotional distance or marriage fatigue. This was strategic. Planned. Lies stacked on lies. I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. I drove around for hours, cursing to myself, going over every conversation from the last 3 months. Every shift in tone. Every time she touched me like it was an obligation. Every hug that felt like it had an expiration date. I drove to a park, got out, and just stood there watching people live their lives like mine wasn't imploding. I stood there until the sun went down and my phone buzzed with her text. "You okay? Haven't heard from you. Still working?" I didn't answer. I sat in my truck, staring at that message, feeling something shift inside me. Some part of me, maybe the hopeful, trusting part, died right then. And what replaced it wasn't rage. It wasn't sadness. It was calculation. Cold, methodical, focused. If she thought she was going to cheat on me and walk away clean, she was out of her damn mind. I was done asking questions. Now it was my turn to start playing smart. And that was the day I decided I wasn't just going to catch her. I was going to ruin her. Quietly. Thoroughly. Piece by piece. The way she was doing to our marriage. The next morning I didn't say anything to her. I watched her get ready like I always did, sipping my coffee, nodding at the right moments as she talked about how exhausting her Tuesday schedule would be. She applied makeup in front of the mirror with a level of care she didn't bother with when she was actually going to work, and then chose a dress she hadn't worn since last year's Christmas party. When I asked if it wasn't a bit much for the salon, she didn't even flinch. "It's for confidence," she said while adjusting her neckline. "You dress how you want to feel." That was bullshit. She used to wear old hoodies and joggers to work without giving a damn. She wasn't dressing for confidence. She was dressing to impress someone who hadn't already seen her snore with mouth open and hog the blankets. And still, I didn't say anything. I smiled, kissed her cheek, and watched her walk out the door with the same bag she always carried but a completely different energy in her step. It was like she was excited for something. Not nervous. Not guilty. Just excited. That's what stung the most. I waited 10 minutes. Then I grabbed my keys and left too. Only I didn't head to any job site. I drove around to the back of the neighborhood, cut through some side streets, and parked 2 blocks from our house. I walked back, took the alley that ran behind our yard, and climbed up the back of the neighbor's old shed to get a clear view of our place. I know it sounds insane, but I needed to be sure. I needed to catch it happening with my own eyes, not just guess based on scraps. If I was going to burn down the life we built, I needed to light it with facts, not suspicions. An hour passed. Nothing. Then another 30 minutes. I was starting to feel like an idiot crouching there with my back screaming from leaning forward. Then a black sedan pulled up across the street. Tinted windows. Clean paint. Didn't belong to anyone in our cul-de-sac. It sat there for 2 minutes before Samantha came back out. She looked different. No coat. A different pair of shoes than she left in. She scanned the street, looked both ways, then jogged over to the passenger side and got in. The car pulled away smooth and slow, not a single squeak from the brakes. My stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. I wasn't going to follow them in my truck. I didn't have a tracker. I didn't have any spy gear. I wasn't some private investigator. But I knew my way around locks and buildings, and I knew how to get into places most people couldn't. I went back home, locked the door, and sat in the living room thinking. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then a full hour. My head was spinning with questions. Who was he? How long had it been going on? Did her coworkers know? Did her boss know? Was this some long-running thing that everyone was laughing about behind my back? The images wouldn't stop playing in my head. Her laughing in that car, maybe holding his hand. Him touching her the way I used to. I felt like vomiting, but I couldn't move. She came back just after 2 in the afternoon. Said she was home early because her last appointment canceled. Walked in like nothing happened, makeup still fresh, lips glossier than before. I played dumb. I asked if she wanted anything from the store. She said no, then asked if I was okay because I looked pale. I said I hadn't eaten yet, maybe low blood sugar. She told me to go lie down and said she'd bring me a snack. She didn't know I'd already seen everything I needed to see. That night I couldn't sleep. I laid next to her, listening to her breathe, wondering if she felt anything at all. Wondering if there was ever a moment where she looked at me and felt like a fraud. Or if I was the only one lying in the dark feeling like a fool. Her phone buzzed just after midnight. She didn't reach for it. Just let it vibrate once, twice, and then silence. I sat up, waited, then got out of bed and went into the living room. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. And I wasn't going to get them by sitting still. I left the house and drove straight to her workplace. At night, the whole building was dark except for the security light above the back door. I knew the layout. I'd done some lock work there 2 years ago when they had a break-in scare. I still remembered where the cameras were, how the alarms were set. It took me less than a minute to get inside. I wasn't there to steal anything or wreck the place. I was looking for her locker, her private space, where she kept her secrets. It didn't take long to find. Third locker on the right, small heart sticker peeling from the top corner. I popped it open with one of my old master keys. Inside, it was neat, too neat. Her phone charger, a change of shoes, breath mints, and a cheap burner phone tucked in a zip pouch behind her work smock. I powered it on. No password. First thing that loaded was a text thread with someone saved as D. The first message said, "Pick you up same time?" The last one, from earlier that day, was, "Your mouth should come with a warning label." My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I just stood there looking at the words, then scrolled up. Photos. Some of her. Some of him. Selfies in bathrooms I didn't recognize. I stared at all of it until my eyes blurred. Then I turned off the phone, put it back where I found it, locked the locker, and left the same way I came in. On the drive home, I didn't play music. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just planned. Not a breakdown. A response. If she wanted to fuck around and lie to my face every day, then I was going to take her mask off in front of everyone she thought she was fooling. And I was going to enjoy every second of it. By Friday, I was done pretending. I had spent the last 2 nights barely sleeping, staring at the ceiling while she snored next to me like nothing was wrong, and it had eaten away every bit of patience I had left. I wasn't interested in catching more evidence or reading more disgusting messages or playing quiet detective in my own home. I was ready to put it all out in the open and force her to speak the truth for once without hiding behind fake smiles or makeup and lies. I waited until dinner, made sure everything was calm, no distractions, no phones, no TV. Just me and her sitting across from each other at the table. She was laughing at something on her phone before she noticed me watching her and paused mid-giggle. I didn't blink. "We need to talk," I said, and I didn't try to soften the tone or sugarcoat anything. She put her phone down slowly and sat up straighter. "Okay, what's going on?" I looked her dead in the face and didn't let my voice shake. "Who is the guy picking you up when you're supposed to be at work?" Her expression changed in less than a second. The amusement vanished. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She looked like she was trying to process whether I was guessing or if I knew. "What are you talking about?" she asked, but it was already too late. That question gave her away. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I continued. "Black sedan. You get in. You come back hours later, claiming to be working. Except the salon says you're not even scheduled those days anymore. So let's stop the games." She sat back in her chair, staring at me like I just slapped her across the face. "Why were you at the salon?" "I was checking the only part of your story that still made sense. Turns out, even that was a lie." She went silent for a long moment, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for a way to backpedal, to escape from the conversation entirely. Then she crossed her arms and leaned forward slightly. "So you've been spying on me?" I didn't even blink. "I've been watching my marriage fall apart while you play house with someone else." Her jaw clenched, and she stood up abruptly, pushing the chair back with a sharp scrape. "You had no right to follow me, no right to dig through my private stuff." I stood up too, not shouting, not raising my hands, just meeting her where she was. I had every right to know what was being done behind my back. "You're my wife. This isn't some casual fling we're talking about. You live in this house, you wear that ring, and yet you've been sneaking around like I don't even exist." She started pacing, rubbing her temples like she was the victim here. "It's not what you think. It's not serious. It's just, I needed something different. Something for me. You needed to throw away 6 years of marriage for what? For car rides and lies. You couldn't talk to me? You couldn't just tell me you were unhappy. It wasn't about being unhappy, she snapped, turning back toward me. It was about not feeling like myself anymore. I got tired of being the same person every day. I wanted to feel like I still had choices. So your choice was to lie and cheat and walk out of here like a coward every week. She didn't answer that one. She just looked away and bit her lip, like the silence was supposed to cover what she didn't want to say out loud. I took a deep breath and stepped closer, not aggressive, just focused. How long? Her arms dropped to her sides. A few months. His name? She hesitated again, then mumbled something I couldn't hear. Speak up. Derek. His name is Derek. He's just someone I met through a client. It wasn't planned. I laughed, not because anything was funny, but because the pathetic way she said it felt like she was trying to sell it as an accident. So what now? You keep seeing him? You expect me to stay here while you live two lives? I didn't plan for any of this, she said, and for the first time, her voice cracked a little. I wasn't trying to hurt you. You weren't trying not to, either. We stood there, facing each other, the room quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the low buzz of a car passing outside. It felt like the longest silence of my life. She looked like she wanted to cry, but nothing came out. I wasn't moved. I wasn't going to comfort her for breaking something we built together just because she suddenly felt bad now that she got caught. I'm not begging you, she said finally, her voice lower. If you want to leave, then leave. I won't stop you. I'm not leaving, I replied. Not yet. You did this. You turned our life into a joke, not me. You made your decisions. But from this point on, I decide how this ends. I don't owe you kindness. I owe you truth. She nodded, once, slowly, and left the room. Just like that. No apology. No fight. Just retreat. Like it was easier to walk away than to own up to everything. And I stood there, staring at the empty chair, knowing that nothing about our life was real anymore. Not the photos on the walls, not the anniversary cards in the drawer, not even the way she said, I love you before heading to work. After that night, I didn't raise my voice again. I didn't ask her where she was going. And I didn't stop her when she left the house with freshly curled hair and a bag that no longer held work shoes. I didn't check her phone or dig through her purse anymore. I already had the answers. I wasn't looking for the truth anymore. I was looking for the right moment to pull the plug on everything and do it in a way she'd never forget. I had no interest in screaming matches or dragging my pain around like a wounded animal. I had spent years being dependable, loyal, steady. I gave her comfort, gave her room to grow, supported her through every stupid salon promotion and every pointless feud with her coworkers. She took that version of me and used it like a doormat. I didn't need to yell. I needed to flip the entire script. She made the mistake of leaving her laptop open one evening when she went to grab groceries. Her messages synced to it without her noticing. I saw weeks' worth of conversations with him. His full name, his apartment address, even voice notes she sent where she laughed about how clueless I was. She joked about how she still made me coffee in the mornings just to keep me from getting suspicious. I sat there reading every word until I couldn't feel anything anymore. It wasn't even about hurt. It was about disrespect. She didn't just betray me. She belittled me. That was all the fuel I needed. I spent the next 4 days gathering everything I needed. I made copies of all the messages, printed screenshots, organized them in folders by date, and sent them to my personal email in case she ever decided to wipe anything. I reached out to her older brother, the one she always pretended she was close to but only called when she needed something. I invited him to lunch and showed him the screenshots. He didn't say much, just shook his head and promised he'd keep quiet. That's all I needed. One person on the inside to make sure the fallout reached exactly the people it needed to. She had a work event coming up on Saturday, a small industry party her salon hosted every year to mingle with clients and boost their business. They always invited close friends and family to make it look bigger than it was. She asked me if I wanted to go, like nothing had happened. I smiled and said I'd think about it. She smiled back like we were healing, like her little meltdown during our fight had passed and things were returning to normal. She was so confident in her ability to lie that it made my skin crawl. I said yes the night before the event. She seemed surprised but pleased, and I could tell she already had her little speech prepared about how relationships go through rough patches, and how she was just confused for a while. But she didn't know what I was bringing with me. I had printed 10 envelopes. Each one had a different name. Her boss. Her coworker who covered for her. Her parents. The salon's client manager. The guy's apartment building front desk, just in case. Each envelope contained a neat, well-organized stack of screenshots, the texts, the dates she claimed to be working, and the ones where she talked about how gullible everyone around her was. We showed up to the event, and she held my hand like nothing had happened. She introduced me to people with that same polished charm she used on strangers. I nodded, smiled, laughed when appropriate. I handed the first envelope to her boss within 10 minutes. Told her it was a document Samantha needed her to review privately. Then I handed the second one to her friend who handled bookings. Told her it was some feedback from clients that Samantha asked me to pass on. I watched them both open their envelopes from across the room. I watched their faces drop. I saw the confusion, then disgust. I saw the way they started whispering. One by one, I walked around the room delivering the rest. Samantha noticed something was off when 3 of her coworkers suddenly stopped talking to her mid-conversation. She turned toward me with this confused look, like a kid who just got caught breaking a rule they thought no one noticed. She walked over and grabbed my arm. "What's going on?" I leaned in, smiled slightly, and said quietly, "You should check in with your boss." She turned away and walked over to the corner where her manager stood, envelope still half open in her hand. They talked. I watched. The volume rose. Samantha's face flushed, her voice cracked, her hand went up to her chest like she couldn't breathe. I didn't move. I just stood there, letting her drown in her own mess. There was no fight, no yelling, no scene from my side. Just the cold facts, delivered to every person whose opinion she ever pretended to care about. When she finally turned around to look at me, her eyes wide, her face pale, I gave her one last nod. Then I walked out. I didn't run. I didn't slam the door. I just walked to my car and drove home. When I got there, I took her spare key off my key ring, left it on the counter with a note that said, "Change the locks yourself this time." She didn't come home that night, and I didn't expect her to. After what happened at the event, she must have been scrambling to salvage what was left of her image, begging her coworkers to believe whatever lie she thought might work, or sitting in her car wondering how it all crumbled so fast. I slept just fine for the first time in weeks. The next morning, I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and waited. Around 10, I heard the key turn. The door opened slow like she was unsure what she'd find inside, like she half expected her stuff to be thrown on the lawn. She stepped in quietly, shut the door behind her, and didn't say a word. Her face was blank, her hair was tied up like she hadn't bothered to brush it, and she was still wearing yesterday's outfit. She stood there, clutching her purse with both hands like she was trying to keep herself from falling apart. "You want to talk, or are you just here to cry?" I asked without looking up from my cup. She didn't sit right away, just hovered near the chair before finally pulling it out and lowering herself into it slowly, like even sitting down felt heavy. "I don't even know where to start," she said. I looked her straight in the eye. "Try the truth. You haven't done that in a long time." She swallowed hard, then dropped her gaze to the table. "You embarrass me in front of everyone I work with." I let out a quiet breath and leaned forward slightly. "You embarrassed yourself. I just handed out copies of your work. You wrote every word they read." She nodded slowly, rubbing her fingers together, her voice quieter now. "It was stupid. All of it. I never thought it would go that far. I didn't think I'd get caught. That's the part that eats at me," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "Not the cheating. Not the lying. The fact that you thought I was too blind or too stupid to ever catch on. That's what burns." Her shoulders tensed like she wanted to argue but couldn't find a way around it. "I didn't plan any of this. I didn't start it thinking I'd hurt you. That's not an excuse. That's an insult. You had a dozen chances to stop. You could have walked away from it. Instead, you hid it, protected it, made it part of your life, and shoved me out of the way like I didn't matter." "I didn't mean to shove you out," she whispered. "Then why did you?" I said, louder this time. "Why make me feel like a stranger in my own house? Why smile at me while you were texting him behind my back? Why sit across from me every night like you weren't living another life already?" She looked up, tears welling in her eyes now, but I didn't care. I wasn't moved. I didn't come here to make peace or feel sorry for her. I needed her to say it, to admit it all, not just to me, but to herself. "I don't know," she said, shaking her head. I was tired. I felt stuck. I hated waking up and doing the same thing every day. I missed feeling wanted. I missed being noticed. "So instead of fixing anything, you decided to destroy it," I said sharply. "You had me. You had a man who supported you, trusted you, gave you everything. And you traded it for car rides and text messages." She leaned back in the chair, wiping her face. "I know. And I regret it. I wish I could take it back. But you can't, I said. You made that choice. You crossed the line. And now you have to live with it. There was a long pause where neither of us spoke. Just silence, thick and ugly, sitting between us like a third person in the room. Eventually, she broke it. What happens now? She asked. I stood up, grabbed a folder off the kitchen counter, and set it down in front of her. These are the divorce papers. Already signed my part. You can either sign now, or take it with you, but I'm not waiting around for closure. She looked at it like it might explode. You're really ending it? You ended it a long time ago, I said. I'm just the one making it official. She stared at the folder, then up at me again. Is there anything I can say to fix this? No, I said without hesitation. Because if you really cared about fixing anything, you wouldn't have broken it in the first place. She nodded slowly, lips trembling, hands shaking as she pulled the folder toward her. She didn't try to hug me, didn't beg, didn't yell. Maybe she finally realized that the version of me who would have forgiven her was gone, replaced by the man she created with every lie she told. I'll bring it back signed, she said quietly. I won't be here, I replied. Leave it with your key. She stood up, held the folder to her chest like it would protect her from the consequences, and walked to the door. Before opening it, she turned back one last time. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't answer. I just looked at her until she opened the door, stepped out, and closed it behind her. She dropped the signed papers off 2 days later. I didn't hear the door open. I didn't see her come in. But when I walked into the kitchen that evening, the folder was there, exactly where I'd left it, her key resting on top of it. No note. No message. Just silence. That was fine with me. We'd already said everything that needed to be said. I picked up the folder, checked her signature, and put it in the envelope I had ready for the lawyer. I dropped it off first thing the next morning, didn't even wait to sit down. I just handed it over, got a receipt, and walked out. There was no drama, no second thoughts, no dragging the process out for months like you hear people do when they still think there's something to fix. For me, it was over the moment she chose someone else while living under the roof we paid for together. After that, I started changing things. Not for her. For myself. I got rid of the bed, bought a new one, different size, different frame. I repainted the bedroom, changed the layout, got rid of all the photos. Not just of her, of us. There was no point keeping any of it. That life didn't exist anymore. Every time I looked at a picture of us smiling, I just saw what I didn't know back then. I stopped talking to her family, blocked her brother even though he never said a bad word. I didn't want the reminders. I didn't want the updates. If she wanted to rebuild her life, that was her problem. Mine was moving forward without dragging her along in my head. My friends were mixed. Some were supportive, others wanted details, like it was entertainment. A few of them were angry for me, told me I should have burned her car or posted the screenshots online. I didn't care what they thought. Revenge isn't about making a mess. It's about making sure the person who betrayed you knows they ruined the one good thing they had. I didn't need to scream at her or threaten anyone. I made sure her coworkers knew who she really was. That was enough. A month after the divorce was finalized, I got a text from an unknown number. It was her. She said she hoped I was doing okay. Said she had been thinking about everything and wished she could change the past. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I deleted the message and blocked the number. Not out of hate. Just because I was done letting her take up space in my life. If she had regrets, she could deal with them on her own time. I started going out more. Nothing wild. Just real stuff. Late night walks. Weekends out of town. I visited family I hadn't seen in years. Took a short trip to a cabin where no one knew who I was. Brought a book, left my phone off most of the time. Sat on the porch and just listened to nothing for a while. That was probably the first time in a long time I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to anyone. I wasn't the guy whose wife cheated, or the guy going through a divorce. I was just a guy sitting in a chair, doing whatever the hell he wanted. People always say things like, you'll find someone else, or there's more fish in the sea, like starting over is the cure for betrayal. But I wasn't looking for anyone. I didn't need a new relationship to prove I was worth something. I knew I was. I knew I did everything I could in that marriage. I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I showed up every day, supported her, gave her space, and stayed loyal. If that wasn't enough for her, that's not on me. That's on her. She gambled with what we had and lost. I didn't need to replace her. I just needed to rebuild the parts of myself that she left in pieces. Looking back, I don't regret how I handled it. I didn't destroy her life, but I didn't protect her either. I exposed what she was doing to the people around her, not with anger, but with proof. I didn't give her the luxury of slipping away quietly. She had to face it. That's the part most cheaters never get. They lie, they sneak around, and when they're caught, they want to skip to the forgiveness without dealing with the damage. I made sure she sat in it. That's the one thing I'll always be proud of. It's strange waking up alone now, but not in a bad way. The silence is real. It's not the kind where you're being ignored. It's the kind where no one's lying to your face. No one's pretending. No one's hiding messages in a burner phone or parking 2 blocks away to keep a secret. It's just quiet. And that's enough for me. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not waiting for some apology that will never come. I'm not tracking what she's doing, who she's with, or where she ended up. I don't need to know. I just need to keep going. Life doesn't stop because someone tried to wreck yours. You keep going. You get stronger. And you make sure the next time someone steps into your life, they know they're either all in or they're out from day one. So yeah, I lost a marriage. But I didn't lose myself. She did that. And now, every time she thinks back to what we had, she'll know exactly who ruined it and exactly why she's alone.